Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It is Friday, October 15th, 2021. I'm Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis for the Week 6 NFL Primetime show. And Crash, this reminds me, I've been thinking about this as we're doing these primetime specific podcasts this season for the Sunday night and Monday night games. And of course, we've got Geno Smith and Big Ben off in game one, and then we've got Buffalo and Tennessee in game two. But with you being around the same age as me, and this is your birthday weekend, so it made me think of it. You must have watched that NFL primetime show on ESPN back in the day with Chris Berman and Tom Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was what a finish to all those Sunday nights. What a show.
Yeah, definitely. And I was also just thinking that we're after midnight on the East Coast, so it's technically my birthday.
It's officially, you're right. I was giving you the credit in the central time zone there as it's still being the 15th, but on the East Coast it is the 16th, so happy birthday officially.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, well, let's give out some goodies here with these primetime matchups. We are going to start with Seattle and Pittsburgh. Big story here, of course, Russell Wilson out. He is officially on IR. We're recording this right late on Friday night, so we have that news. Chris Carson also on IR. So we've got Geno Smith. Man, it's been a while since he was really in the forefront of the NFL. Really back when NFL Primetime was still being aired consistently with Tom Jackson. But we got a little glimpse of Geno Smith in that Thursday night game against the Rams. And he did okay statistically, until that last pick, which wasn't really his fault because Lockett fell. But now Pittsburgh has a week to prepare for him, and they are the underdogs on the road here. So Vegas is really not expecting much out of Geno Smith and company in terms of being productive and getting in the end zone. And that makes sense to me. Pittsburgh's been pretty solid against just defensively across the board, especially on the ground. So I think the better matchup for Seattle on paper is to try to throw it. But how is Geno going to do? Well, in terms of actually putting a roster together, I'll just jump right to my key strategy here on the Seattle side, which is to get exposure to these wide receivers, DK and Lockett, and potentially just fade Geno. Especially on DraftKings, you get the PPR. He can set those guys up for decent days and not necessarily pay off himself if they're not scoring a bunch of touchdowns.
Yeah.
And Pittsburgh has given up the second most fantasy points to wide receivers, and really inside and outside. So Metcalf and Lockett both squarely in play for me. And if you look at what Geno did down the stretch, he really spread the targets out pretty evenly between those guys. He did get the touchdown to DK, but I think they're both in play. So that's my key strategy really overall. What do you think about Geno in this passing attack?
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to be doing something kind of similar with the quarterbacks and wide receivers for Pittsburgh. So I think that, not playing the quarterback but taking the wide receivers, I think that's going to be a pretty good move on this slate.
Yeah, and when you get a low-scoring game on paper projected with the over-under, if it does play out that way, then it certainly could be the ideal strategy. So we'll keep playing with that. Looking at this rushing game a little bit, Pittsburgh, they're not giving up rushing touchdowns. They're not giving up many receptions to the running backs. So it's just not a great situation for Alex Collins and company. I think he's playable moving forward here in Chris Carson's absence. Yeah. I just don't think this is the best matchup for him. So if I'm making one lineup, I'm probably fading that backfield. We also have the tight end situation, which is flipped because Gerald Everett is now going to be active. He, of course, missed that Rams game being on the COVID list. So you want to downgrade Will Dissly a little bit. But I don't think you necessarily have to go there either. Pittsburgh giving up the ninth fewest points to tight ends. So, what are your thoughts there on the running backs and tight ends? Any interest?
I've seen, you're talking about Alex Collins.
Yeah.
For Seattle. Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of him when he was at Arkansas, and he's definitely had his moments in the NFL, but I think that he's kind of also been pretty inconsistent. So he'll have, a really nice game sometimes in a relief appearance and then just kind of disappear the next week. So that would be my concern, especially against Pittsburgh, who's pretty tough front. Their front's pretty tough. And as far as tight ends, I know that the Steelers are going to have Devin Bush back, so that's going to help them against, the tight ends and just their defense in general. So, I'm not quite sure if I would want to go there with either the running backs or the tight ends for the Seahawks.
Okay. Well, let's transition to that Pittsburgh side. It sounds like we are both probably leaning there a little bit more towards our exposure. Mm-hmm. So why don't you take the first crack at breaking that side down?
Yeah, so for me, from the top, I'm looking at Najee Harris. He's 17,700 at the captain spot, 11,800 in the flex on DraftKings.
Expensive.
But he's
for
very
a running back. Yeah,
and he's actually, not to get into our second game, but he's actually higher priced than Derrick Henry. So
yeah, I mean that jumped out at me seeing that price. I mean, he gets a ton of targets.
Yeah,
he's a huge part of this offense, but ultra pricey.
Oh yeah, definitely. And he's been, the leading fantasy scorer for the Steelers all year. He's averaging about 20.5 fantasy points per game on DraftKings. He's been targeted 39 times, which is the most of any of their wide receivers or anyone else on the team. So seeing a ton of targets. Now, he did have the game where he had, 19 targets and 14 receptions against Cincinnati. So that obviously has skewed those statistics, quite a bit. But this is also going to be his most favorable matchup on paper, at least, as Seattle has allowed the third most fantasy points to halfbacks. And, he's the top option for them and probably be the highest owned player on the slate. But I mean, it's for a good reason. I mean, he's been their top option, and like I said, this is a very favorable matchup for him. So that's what I'm looking at with Harris. And then as far as the receivers go, you've got Deontay Johnson, who's been their top option, their top wide receiver, partly due to Claypool being out, but even still, he's seen 37 targets this year, and it was kind of crazy. He only saw 2 targets last week, but he still had 2 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown. So he almost had similar numbers to what he was putting up when he was getting 8-9 catches in a game on just 2 catches. But, going up against Seattle, they ranked 28th. So the 4th most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So I think that his targets will be back up this week, as it'll be a more of a passing friendly environment. So I definitely like Deontay Johnson for $1,000. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in on him just because I do like him a lot here as well. And of course, the big news with Juju out for the season, I think Deontay is going to soak up some of those short, intermediate routes and targets.
Yeah,
because like last year, remember how hard it was to pair Ben up with if you were going to pick one receiver, because he targeted those guys heavily.
Yeah.
But all 3 of them would get a lot of targets, and so it could come down to, well, who's going to get the touchdown. So it's a lot easier now with Juju out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like Deontay here, getting those short passes.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, Deontay, like we saw last year too, he's just been like a target monster, so still expect him to have a ton of targets this week. And then if you wanted to pay down just a little bit, you can pay down to Chase Claypool. Had his best game of the year last week with 5 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown. But I'm definitely leaning between the two. I'm leaning more towards Johnson. So,
okay.
And if you want to go real deep into the roster, you can go and look for a value play. In Anthony Miller, he was just recently signed from the Bears on the to the practice squad on Tuesday, with Juju Smith-Schuster being down. And he's $1,500 at the captain. He's $1,000 in the flex. So really good value price there. Just have to make sure that he's going to be active, on Sunday night. If he is, he's gonna be the value play I'm looking at from Pittsburgh. If he's not, you could also look at James Washington. He's supposed to be back after an injury. Kept him out briefly last week. 5,200 in the flex, 7,800 in the captain spot. So that's another option for value. But hopefully Miller will be active, and then we can really pay down.
Yeah, Miller turning into a journeyman. Chicago, Houston.
Definitely.
I was kind of surprised he got that touchdown with Houston, and then they waived him, and so that is going to be the key news here as we wait until Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday night.
Yeah,
to see if he's active. So definitely we'll be on top of that, and we won't be releasing our lineups to our members, of course, until we have that information. Anything else on this side? The tight ends, Freiermuth, Ebron, sort of a split situation.
Yeah, they are, and they just haven't been producing. I was looking at their numbers, and they're getting like 2 and 3 fantasy points a game. I mean, it's just not really what we want. So
no, it's not. Yeah, those guys are GPP only, really, most likely because of the low volume and the shared snaps.
Mm-hmm.
So so we'll follow the news here. Hopefully that got everybody ready for Sunday to start to build your lineups. And before we get to Buffalo and Tennessee, just want to remind folks that we will have full lineups for our members, specifically on FanDuel and Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
So jump in with us if you'd like those. We give out cash lineups and GPP lineups for all these showdown games. DFSCoachTalk.com, the website that you see right there at the top of the screen. That's where you sign up, and we'll invite you into our Discord with an email. Give out the lineups about 45 minutes before kickoff, and we give our core plays on DraftKings for cash and GPP. All right, game 2, Josh. Let's head to the Monday night battle between Buffalo and Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Looking like potentially some more fantasy action on paper, with a total of 53.5 at BetUS.com.pa, one of our partners. And Buffalo favored by 6 on the road. They have really gotten hot here after that loss to Pittsburgh. They reeled off 4 straight wins, a couple of big shutouts, the win over KC. And now they've got Tennessee, who's getting healthier. And I know you'll tell us about that here in a minute. But let me start on the Buffalo side. And, I mean, how can you not like this position for Josh Allen? The guy's on a roll. If you look at what Kyler Murray did as a mobile quarterback against Tennessee way back in week 1, remember that? 289, 4 touchdowns. He ran for a score, just had his way.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the spot for Josh Allen. He's the ultra expensive guy now in this slate, 12,800 on DraftKings, but that's certainly no surprise.
Right.
And I would like to pair him up with a receiver or two. This passing attack is the way to get after Tennessee. They're allowing 279 yards per game, 21st. I would call them sort of an average to below average defense. So you can run against them too, but little better matchup on paper with the passing attack. They allow the most fancy points to wide receivers. So I'm looking at Diggs here. He's got an excellent rating from Pro Football Focus in this game, and Beasley. So that's where I want to start here. I want to talk about those 3 guys, get your input on that. If you look at some of these previous matchups with Tennessee, they've been beaten on the outside, beaten on the inside. If you look at Lockett, what he did against them, even Jamison Crowder. So I like Beasley here, 5,400 on DraftKings. He's a potential GPP captain for me.
Mm-hmm.
We talk a lot about strategy for these showdowns because we give out all these lineups for showdowns. So we got to be on top of it. And you can go with Josh Allen, and then you're going to have to fill in with some cheap guys that you might not be thrilled about. Or you can pay down for Diggs as a captain. But if you go with Beasley, then you can get a little more excited about how the rest of your lineup works out. And we're on DraftKings, so PPR, and Beasley. He's a perfect GPP guy because he's had a couple big games, but then last week he was almost non-existent against Kansas City.
Right.
So that's where I'm starting my build here with Buffalo. What are your thoughts on Allen and the passing game?
Yeah, I've been waiting for Diggs to have that big, that monster breakout game this year, and so far it hasn't happened. So it's just bound to happen any minute. One of these games here real soon. So why not this week in a very favorable matchup against this Tennessee secondary? And I like the call with Beasley because, like you said, he's going to be lower owned, and just not a lot of people are going to be thinking to play him on this kind of slate. So I like that. And obviously Josh Allen, I mean, he's back in that MVP caliber playing level of play. So he's definitely, he's pretty much just been the top quarterback the last couple of weeks in many ways. So,
yeah. And then in terms of, how it plays out, Emmanuel Sanders had the 2 touchdowns. So Diggs kind of disappointed in that sense against Kansas City, but it certainly could be his turn this time around.
Has he got a touchdown yet?
Diggs?
Yeah.
I think he's at either 1 or 0.
Yeah.
That's what I was double check that. Yeah.
1 or 0, but yeah.
So he certainly do, no doubt about it. Now, the other guy who kind of stole the show against Kansas City was Dawson Knox. Once again, he's had some big games. He's really gotten a bunch of touchdowns here. You were on him against Houston. He went over 100 yards against Kansas City. Now, in this matchup, Tennessee has given up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but they really haven't faced a strong group of them. I think Knox is definitely the best that they've faced.
Mm-hmm.
And last week, Dan Arnold, 6 for 64. So, Knox is sort of an in-betweener for me, where this is the type of situation I'd like to invest in where, they are strong on paper against tight ends, but if you dig in, you can see that it actually is a decent matchup because Knox is so skilled. In fact, Pro Football Focus gives him a 56% advantage in his matchup, which is pretty significant. So I'd like to play him because of that, but he's 7,600 on DraftKings. So, that's pretty pricey for a tight end. So that's why, right now he might be on the outside looking in for me, but I'm gonna keep playing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he had that monster game against Kansas City, so
yeah, he's really developing a nice little rhythm here, and a really important security blanket for Josh Allen that makes that offense even that more dynamic with all these weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the running backs have a 40%. The offensive line has a 40% run blocking advantage against Tennessee on paper, so it looks decent. But this is just a backfield that, in general, I like to avoid. Moss has been the touchdown guy. Certainly got more touches against Kansas City, but he's more expensive. So you don't need to go there. This is again sort of like Seattle. It's a backfield that I think if I'm making one lineup, I'm probably going to pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my internet actually cut out, so I'm not sure exactly what you were saying there. So apologize, but
okay, yeah. So any strong interest in either of these Buffalo running backs? Or are you ready to basically fade that backfield like me?
Yeah, I mean, I like Zach Moss. It's hard to know sometimes whether he or Singletary is going to get the carries, but it seems like he's been getting quite a bit of. So it's a bit Moss, if anyone.
Okay, all right. So let's transition to the Tennessee side, and as the big underdogs here at home, sort of an uphill battle.
Yeah.
Do you have any secrets for the Titans side? Anything that you think is going to work that
Well,
we might want to focus on?
yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be some tough sledding for Tennessee. Buffalo's number 1 in fantasy points allowed against quarterbacks, number 1 in fantasy points allowed against wide receivers, and number 3 in fantasy points allowed against halfbacks. So it doesn't leave much.
No, it doesn't.
They're like number 11, I think, against tight ends. So they're not even that bad against tight ends. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be some tough sledding. Obviously, I think a lot of people are going to be wanting to play Derrick Henry. The top fantasy halfback this season is averaging just under 30 fantasy points per game. But like I said, Buffalo's allowed the 3rd fewest points per game to halfbacks. And I think fading him in tournaments, although it would be bold, I think it'd be a really nice leverage move possibly. So and then when it comes to they've allowed the fewest fantasy points wide receivers. So AJ Brown and Julio Jones, they don't look like great options either. Of the two, AJ Brown seems to have the more favorable matchup as he's projected to line up against Levi Wallace, who Pro Football Focus says that he has a 92.8 matchup advantage against. And Brown, AJ Brown is 7,800 on DraftKings in the flex, and then 11,700 in the captain spot. So that would be of the wide receivers. AJ Brown would be where I would lean, and then I'm possibly going to fade Derrick Henry. I'm not sure, but there's really not much at all that I like on Tennessee, honestly.
Yeah, I mean the numbers across the board are just really strong for that Buffalo defense. Number 1 in points allowed too, only 12.8 per game. They haven't had real tough matchups with running backs. Obviously, nobody in the caliber of Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. I mean, it's really that's the key question for this slate is do you fade him with how expensive he is? And I think it's doable. It's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there's not many players in the NFL who probably want to try to tackle him. And even if they have the courage to take on that beast, are capable of doing it repeatedly all night. They just wear people down because they give him so many carries.
Right.
So it's a real challenge to fade him, but I think it's worth looking at in this matchup. But like you said, it's hard to get excited about anybody else for Tennessee. These wide receivers, they've been banged up. Are they 100% in these tough matchups? They're a lot cheaper here than the top Buffalo receivers.
Right.
But you just don't have as much confidence.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fun one because if you get a couple of those guys for a GPP, then you can still afford the guys on Buffalo that you want. Now, you could. We got to get somebody from Tennessee, right? We can't just take 5 Buffalo guys in the defense. So we'll see who's active for the wide receivers. They've kind of been mixing and matching their 3rd and 4th wide receivers, guys injured coming in and out of the lineup. But we've got Jeremy McNichols for 3,000. You could go there. He's been getting a couple catches per week. Ferkser at 4,000. He's probably the guy you feel most confident about getting a handful of targets. What do you think about any of these value plays for Tennessee?
Yeah, I was thinking we may even have to go with like one of the kicker,
Yep.
I mean, that's always a viable option, in these kind of showdown slate setups. So that's honestly that could possibly be, if I go with maybe AJ Brown in the kicker or something like that, that might possibly be my Tennessee exposure, and that would be it, maybe even just one of those two.
Yeah, that certainly could be the way to go. Well, for the listeners out there, give us your thoughts on Tennessee. Are we missing anything? Is there somebody we should be excited about? Because we're not excited about this side. We like Buffalo this week. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. We appreciate you all tuning in. We'd love to have you do the old thumbs up combo with the subscribe to the channel and hit the alert button so you know when the podcasts are going to come out. We've completed the main slate podcast, so check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Get ready for the week 6 main slate. And that should do it. Hopefully everybody's off to a good start here building those lineups for the showdowns. Can't wait to finalize ours for the members on all 3 sites. So again, jump in at dfscoachtalk.com for some lineups. Let us know if you have any questions on Twitter at dfscoachtalk. And coming up next week, we'll have our NBA podcast to start the season. So check those out as well. All right, that does it for the Primetime Show. Josh, have a great birthday weekend. I'll see you as we build some lineups. And on behalf of the birthday boy and the rest of the DFS Coach Talk team, I'm Andrew Hanson. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time as we look to crush it in DFS.